Okay, welcome back everyone to the deep dive. Today we're looking at AI, but maybe not how you usually think about it. Forget AI being just another, tool in the scientist's kit.
Right. It's much more than that.
We've got a stack of sources here showing it's fundamentally changing the entire game of discovery. This deep dive is all about artificial intelligence and scientific discovery.
Exactly. It's less about just doing science faster, though it does that, and much more about doing science differently. It's a real paradigm shift, you could say.
So our mission today, based on all this material, is to really unpack how AI is, supercharging the scientific method, reshaping it even.
Yeah.
We'll hit some game-changing breakthroughs in areas like medicine, materials.
Big areas, yeah.
And also get real about the challenges because, this kind of revolution doesn't come without hurdles.
Absolutely. And you should think of this as maybe a shortcut to understanding this whole shift. How AI is promising to, collapse timelines, unlock insights, things like designing drugs, building materials atom by atom. It's complex stuff, but really vital to grasp right now.
Okay, let's jump right in then. We all kind of learned the classic scientific method in school, right?
Mm.
Hypothesis, experiment, look at the data, analyze. How does AI actually plug into that or even disrupt that familiar flow?
Well, what's really fascinating and what the sources make clear is that AI is starting to touch every single stage. It's not just automating a step here or there.
Huh?
It changes the actual approach.
Okay, how so? Like hypothesis generation, that feels very human, creative even.
Traditionally, yes. It's creative, it's labor-intensive, needs deep expertise, reading just mountains of literature, trying to connect the dots.
Right, relying on intuition, existing knowledge, that spark.
And that's incredibly powerful, of course, but it's also limited by, human capacity.
Yeah.
What AI can do now is sift through these vast digital universes. We're talking millions of research papers, patents, public databases, clinical trial results, experimental data archives.
Just an unbelievable amount of information.
Exactly. And it finds these non-obvious connections, these correlations and patterns that, frankly, no single human or even team could possibly spot. Things buried in the sheer noise and volume.
So it's almost like suggesting starting points or relationships we just wouldn't have thought of, completely new angles.
Precisely. It leads to new, genuinely data-driven hypotheses, often surprising ones. It can open up totally novel research avenues based on insights synthesized from this ocean of data. It's discovery powered by unexpected synthesis.
Wow. Okay, that alone is a huge shift. So once AI helps generate a hypothesis, what about designing the experiment to test it? How does it help optimize that part?
Yeah, AI can dramatically refine experimental design, too. It can help identify which parameters are the most critical to test or vary. It can suggest the most efficient experimental setups based on previous results or simulations.
So making the experiment smarter from the start.
Smarter, and sometimes it can even predict potential outcomes, which helps researchers prioritize, which experiments are most likely to yield valuable results before they sink time and resources into the lab work.
Kind of predicting where the gold might be buried.
Exactly. And the sources really hammer this home. AI is increasingly integrating with automation. We're seeing AI controlling robotic lab platforms now. Think high throughput screening on a massive scale, automated chemical synthesis, automated data acquisition.
So the experiments themselves are happening at a scale and speed that was just unthinkable before.
Oh, orders of magnitude faster. I mean, imagine running thousands, maybe even millions of variations of an experiment automatically with the AI guiding the next steps based on incoming results. That kind of speed is transformative.
Which must be critical because, as you said, the amount of data coming out of modern science, it must just be overwhelming.
It really is. The sources call it a data deluge. You have instruments like next-gen gene sequencers, cryo-electron microscopes, large telescopes, sensor networks. They generate terabytes, petabytes of incredibly complex, often noisy, high-dimensional data.
And this is where AI, especially deep learning, comes in.
This is where it absolutely excels. It's built to handle that kind of complexity and noise far better than traditional statistical methods.
How specifically?
Well, it can automatically classify images, say from microscopes or medical scans. It can find really subtle signals or anomalies hidden deep within noisy data sets, like from particle accelerators or astronomical surveys. It can extract the relevant features and do all this far, far faster and often with higher accuracy than manual analysis. It makes sorting through, say, vast genomic data sets or incredibly complex simulation outputs actually tractable.
Okay, so AI is helping form the questions, design and run the experiments, and interpret the raw data. What about building understanding from that data, creating models?
All right, the next step. AI is being used to build highly sophisticated predictive models for really complex systems, biological systems, chemical reactions, physical phenomena. These models can do a few key things.
Like what?
For one, they allow for in silico testing, basically running virtual experiments inside the computer under countless different conditions. This saves enormous amounts of time and money compared to doing everything physically in the lab or clinic.
Testing ideas virtually first.
Exactly. And these AI models can often provide deeper insights into the underlying mechanisms of the system they're modeling. They can reveal how things work, not just predict what will happen.
Yeah.
And the sources mentioned something really interesting: physics-informed neural networks.
Physics-informed, what does that mean?
It means they actually bake known scientific laws, like the laws of thermodynamics or fluid dynamics or conservation of energy, directly into the AI model itself.
So the AI's predictions have to follow the fundamental rules of the universe. It can't suggest something physically impossible.
Precisely. It builds in fundamental scientific understanding, which prevents scientifically nonsensical predictions and makes the models much more robust and trustworthy. It's a really powerful concept.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Okay, one more stage. Knowledge synthesis. You mentioned the deluge of data, but there's also the deluge of papers. Keeping up is impossible.
Oh, tell me about it. It feels like a full-time job, just reading everything relevant. Even in a narrow field, it's exponential growth.
So how does AI help there?
AI tools, especially using natural language processing, NLP, are becoming absolutely indispensable for this kind of knowledge discovery and synthesis. They can help researchers navigate this immense volume of literature.
Now,
They can summarize papers, extract key findings, synthesize information from hundreds or thousands of disparate sources, identify emerging trends or techniques, even find potential interdisciplinary links you might have missed. Some tools are even assisting in drafting manuscripts sections or literature reviews.
wow, it's like having an incredibly well-read, super-fast research assistant that can connect dots across millions of documents.
That's a pretty good analogy, yeah. It helps manage the information overload and potentially spark new ideas by highlighting connections.
So looking at the whole picture, AI is really getting woven into the entire scientific cycle, from finding the initial question all the way to helping communicate the answer. That feels like a truly massive shift in how science actually gets done.
It really is fundamental.
Now, you mentioned game-changing breakthroughs earlier. Where are we seeing the most striking impact right now? Let's maybe start with one of the world's biggest challenges, developing new medicines.
Right, drug development is a perfect example because it's notoriously difficult, incredibly expensive. You hear figures like 10 to 15 years, often billions of dollars to bring one new drug to market.
And most candidates fail along the way.
A very, very high failure rate, especially in clinical trials. So AI is being applied specifically to tackle these critical bottlenecks that make it so slow, costly, and risky.
Okay, so how does AI help speed up that very slow, very expensive process? Where does it intervene?
It starts really early, actually, in what's called target identification and validation. AI algorithms can analyze these huge data sets, genomic data, proteomic data, clinical records, literature, to find novel genes, proteins, or biological pathways that are implicated in a specific disease.
So finding completely new places in our biology to aim a therapy at, things that weren't obvious before.
Exactly. Identifying new potential points of intervention. Then, once you have a target, you need to find something that interacts with it, a hit compound, and then optimize that into a potential drug, a lead. This is another area where AI is making huge strides.
Screening chemicals.
Screening, yes, but on a massive scale. AI can screen vast virtual libraries, databases containing millions, sometimes billions, of chemical compounds, computationally predicting how well each one might bind to the disease target.
And it can predict more than just binding.
Oh, yes. Crucially, it can also predict important drug-like properties very early on, things summarized by the acronym ADBMET. Yeah, absorption, distribution, metabolism, excretion, and toxicity. Basically predicting, will this compound get into the body? Where will it go? How will it be broken down? How will it leave? And critically, is it likely to be toxic? Getting an early read on these properties saves enormous downstream effort.
That makes sense. Avoiding candidates that are doomed to fail later.
Exactly. But what's truly revolutionary, and the sources really highlight this, is the rise of generative AI in this space.
Generative AI, like creating new text or images.
Similar idea, but for molecules. These AI models are now capable of designing entirely new drug candidates from scratch de novo drug design. They aren't just searching existing libraries, they're inventing novel molecular structures specifically optimized for the desired properties. Good binding, good AD-MET profile, easy to synthesize.
Whoa, so AI isn't just finding needles in haystacks, it's actually designing the needles it thinks we need.
That's a great way to put it. Designing molecules with properties it predicts will be effective and safe, even before a chemist makes them in a lab. That's a potential accelerator like we've never seen before.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Does AI's impact stop there, or does it go into the clinical trial phase too? That's another huge bottleneck.
Absolutely, it extends there. Clinical trials are complex, expensive, and as we said, where many drugs fail. AI offers several ways to help.
Such as?
It can help optimize the trial design itself, for instance, by identifying more precise patient cohorts, subgroups of patients who are most likely to respond to the drug based on their genetics or other biomarkers. This can lead to smaller, faster, more successful trials.
More targeted trials.
Right. AI can also be used during the trial to predict individual patient responses or even monitor adherence to the treatment protocol using data from wearables or apps. And maybe most importantly, it can help rapidly analyze the enormous, complex data sets generated during trials.
Looking for results faster.
Looking for efficacy signals or potential adverse events much faster and potentially more accurately than traditional statistical analysis. Speeding up that whole analysis phase is critical.
And I think you mentioned drug repurposing too, using old drugs for new tricks.
Yes, that's another promising area. AI can scan through existing approved drugs compounds we already know are relatively safe in humans and predict if they might have new therapeutic uses for different diseases based on their known mechanisms of action or effects identified in large biological data sets.
Finding hidden potential in drugs we already have, that sounds like potentially a much faster path to getting new treatments to patients.
It can be, yeah. Shorter development pathway if the safety profile is already known.
So let's ground this a bit. What's the reality right now, say mid-2025? Is this mostly hype and potential, or is it actually delivering?
Oh, it's very real and moving fast. There's heavy investment from major pharmaceutical companies, biotech startups. You see AI drug discovery companies popping up everywhere, including significant clusters right here in Canada's life sciences hubs.
So the industry is buying in.
Absolutely. And the sources confirm that AI is already demonstrably accelerating the preclinical stages, target ID, hit finding, lead optimization. And while the impact on clinical trial success rates is still unfolding, there's significant promise and early signs that AI can improve the efficiency and speed of those trials too. This isn't just theory anymore, it's actively being implemented and starting to show results.
That's genuinely incredible, especially given the stakes involved in human health. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. From developing drugs to understanding one of biology's most fundamental puzzles, proteins. I've definitely heard about the protein folding problem. Why is that such a big deal?
Ah, yes. Predicting a protein's intricate three-dimensional structure just from its linear sequence of amino acids, that's been called a grand challenge in biology for decades, 50 years, maybe more.
Why is the 3D structure so important?
Because, fundamentally, a protein's structure is its function. The way it folds determines what it can bind to, what reactions it can catalyze, how it interacts with other molecules. Understanding protein structure is absolutely key to understanding life at a molecular level, understanding diseases, and, coming back to our last topic, designing drugs that interact precisely with those structures.
So if you know the structure, you know how it works, and crucially, how you might be able to target it, maybe with a drug.
Exactly right. And this is where AI delivered a truly landmark, some would say revolutionary, achievement, DeepMind's AlphaFold system.
AlphaFold, I remember hearing about that. What was so special about it?
Well, AlphaFold and its subsequent, even more refined versions that exist now in 2025 basically cracked the protein folding problem for a huge number of proteins. It uses very sophisticated deep learning techniques, things like attention mechanisms, graph neural networks, trained on massive public databases containing the sequences and experimentally determined structures of proteins that researchers had painstakingly collected over decades.
So it learned from all that hard-won human experimental knowledge.
Precisely. It learned the patterns, the relationships between sequence and structure. And the key result, the breakthrough, was that AlphaFold can now predict protein structures with an accuracy that is often comparable to those traditional, laborious, and very expensive experimental methods, like X-ray crystallography or cryo-electron microscopy.
Comparable accuracy, but presumably much faster and cheaper.
Oh, at a tiny fraction of the time and cost. We're talking minutes or hours on a computer versus months or years in a specialized lab. This has just opened the floodgates. The AlphaFold team and others using similar AI approaches have now released predicted structures for literally tens of millions of proteins.
Tens of millions, that's staggering. What does having that many predicted protein structures actually mean for science? What can researchers do with that?
It's transformative. It provides immediate structural insights for vast swaths of the proteome, the entire set of proteins for humans and many other organisms, including proteins whose structures were completely unknown before. This dramatically accelerates research into, say, understanding the mechanisms of diseases caused by malfunctioning proteins. It helps us understand how enzymes work for applications in biotechnology or green chemistry. It aids in protein engineering, designing proteins with new functions.
And for drug design.
Immensely valuable. It provides highly accurate 3D targets for rational designing drug molecules that are specifically shaped to fit into and interact with a particular pocket or site on a disease-related protein. It takes a lot of the guesswork out.
It sounds like it just blew open a fundamental bottleneck in biology and medicine.
It really did. And the success of AlphaFold was also a major moment for AI in science generally. It demonstrated very publicly and convincingly the power of modern AI to tackle incredibly complex scientific problems, which really galvanized efforts to apply similar AI techniques in many other scientific fields. And, it's worth pointing out that Canada's foundational research in deep learning over the years played a significant role in building the global knowledge base that ultimately made breakthroughs like AlphaFold possible.
A real testament to the power of combining deep science, big data, and cutting-edge AI. Okay, amazing. Let's shift scale again. We've gone from drugs targeting proteins to understanding proteins themselves. Now let's go from the biological scale to the material world, designing entirely new substances, maybe atom by atom. What's the traditional challenge in discovering new materials?
Well, finding new materials with specific desirable properties, think materials for better batteries, more efficient solar cells, novel catalysts for chemical reactions, stronger and lighter composites for vehicles or aerospace, that search has traditionally been incredibly slow and resource intensive.
How so?
A lot of it relied on basically intuition, experience, and quite a bit of trial and error. You mix elements together, you heat them, you cool them, you synthesize something, you test its properties. If it's not quite right, you tweak the recipe and try again. It's very iterative, can take years, and you might explore only a tiny fraction of the possible materials.
A very manual, painstaking process, not very efficient.
Not at all efficient if you're trying to explore the vast space of possible materials. So, just like with drugs, AI is dramatically accelerating this discovery process in material science.
In similar ways. Screening and designing.
Yes, several key ways. First, high-throughput virtual screening. AI and machine learning models can rapidly screen enormous databases of known or even purely hypothetical materials, millions of potential compositions and structures, and predict their properties.
Predict things like conductivity, strength, stability.
Exactly. Predicting properties like electrical conductivity, thermal stability, mechanical strength, catalytic activity, optical properties, whatever you're looking for. This allows researchers to quickly identify the most promising candidates computationally before trying to synthesize them in the lab.
So filtering down billions of possibilities to maybe just a few dozen really interesting ones worth pursuing experimentally.
That's the idea. Focus the experimental effort where it's most likely to pay off. Second, much like in drug discovery, we're seeing generative materials design. AI models, things like generative adversarial networks, GNs, or variational autoencoders, VAEs, are being used to design entirely novel material structures and compositions from scratch.
Not just finding existing candidates, but inventing completely new materials.
Inventing new materials that are optimized, computationally at least, for a specific set of target properties. The AI is essentially saying, based on what I've learned, this new, previously unknown structure should give you the high conductivity and stability you're looking for.
That's pretty mind-blowing, designing materials on demand.
It's getting there. Third, AI is helping to accelerate the simulations themselves. Calculating material properties from first principles using quantum mechanics methods like density functional theory or DFT is incredibly accurate, but computationally very expensive. Very slow.
Right. Those calculations can take huge amounts of computer time.
Exactly. So AI models are being trained to approximate the results of these expensive quantum simulations much, much faster. They learn the relationship between structure and properties from DFT data and can then predict properties for new structures almost instantly. This enables much faster screening of candidates than relying solely on the traditional, slow simulations.
Speeding up the theoretical prediction side of things?
Correct. And finally, there's the link back to experiments again. Automated experimentation and characterization. AI is being used to analyze the complex data coming from experimental techniques used to study materials, things like electron microscopy images, X-ray diffraction patterns. The AI can automatically identify different phases present in a material, quantify defects, map out variations in properties across a sample.
Making sense of the experimental data faster and maybe more objectively.
Yes, and often this AI-powered analysis is integrated directly with robotic systems for automated synthesis and testing. So the AI might analyze the results of one experiment and then automatically suggest the parameters for the next synthesis run, closing the loop between prediction, synthesis, and characterization.
Wow. So AI is involved in predicting potential materials, designing completely new ones, speeding up the theoretical calculations, and helping automate the making and testing process. What are the big potential benefits here? Where could this lead?
The potential is huge. This acceleration in materials discovery is crucial for innovation in so many areas. Sustainable energy is a big one. Think better materials for batteries, for solar energy harvesting, for fuel cells. Green chemistry relies on finding new, more efficient catalysts. Advanced manufacturing needs new alloys, composites, ceramics. Even fields like quantum computing rely on developing exotic new materials.
So fundamental advances across many sectors.
Absolutely. And the sources do point out that for a country like Canada, with strengths in natural resources, advanced manufacturing, and clean tech, these AI-driven advancements in material science could be particularly beneficial.
It really is remarkable how these core AI capabilities, prediction, generation, analysis, are finding such powerful applications across incredibly diverse scientific fields, from medicine to materials. Now, let's take a step back. What's actually fueling this revolution? What are the essential ingredients making all this possible? The sources seem to point to two critical components.
That's right. Underneath all these breakthroughs, the engine driving them really relies on two key things. First, access to massive high-quality data sets, and second, the development of highly specialized, domain-specific AI models.
Okay, let's unpack those. First, the data. You mentioned the data deluge earlier. Where's all this data coming from, and why is it so absolutely crucial?
Well, as we touched on, it's pouring out of modern scientific instruments. The sequencers, the microscopes, the telescopes, the colliders, it's coming from high-throughput experiments, large-scale computer simulations, and very importantly, it's also coming from decades of accumulated scientific knowledge, carefully curated into large, often public digital libraries and databases.
Can you give some examples of those big databases?
Sure. Think of GenBank for DNA and RNA sequences, the Protein Databank, PDB, which was vital for AlphaFold, PubChem for chemical compounds and their properties, the Materials Project Database for computational material science data. There are many, many others across different fields. These are invaluable repositories of structured scientific information.
And these massive, often publicly available data sets are essentially the fuel that these powerful AI models learn from, training data on an unprecedented scale.
Precisely. They are the fuel, the raw material. AI, especially deep learning, is incredibly data hungry, and the sources really emphasize something critical here. It's not just about having lots of data, it's about the quality, the scale, and crucially, the accessibility of that data.
Quality and accessibility.
Meaning the data needs to be accurate, well annotated, relatively clean, and it needs to be accessible to researchers so they can actually use it to train and test AI models. This is where the fair data principles come in, making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. This isn't just, a bureaucratic ideal. It's absolutely vital for enabling reliable and reproducible AI-driven science. Garbage in, garbage out absolutely applies to AI. Bad data leads to bad AI models and potentially wrong scientific conclusions.
Okay, so massive, high-quality, accessible data is ingredient number one. What's the second piece? You said specialized AI models. Isn't AI just .ai?
Well, yes and no. While general AI techniques and architectures form the foundation, achieving these kinds of specific high-impact scientific breakthroughs usually requires tailoring the AI models to the unique characteristics of scientific data and the specific scientific problem you're trying to solve. You often can't just take an off-the-shelf AI model designed for, say, recognizing cats in photos and expect it to understand complex protein structures or quantum mechanical interactions.
Right. So you need to design the AI specifically for the science. How is that actually done? What makes them domain-specific?
There are a few key ways. One really important approach is incorporating scientific priors or existing scientific knowledge directly into the AI model.
What do you mean by priors?
It means building known physical laws, chemical principles, biological constraints, things we already know are true about the system directly into the AI model's architecture or its training process. We mentioned those physics-informed neural networks earlier. That's a perfect example. Or building in knowledge about molecular symmetries or conservation laws.
Ah, so you're essentially giving the AI some guardrails based on established science, baking in the rules of the game.
Exactly. It guides the AI's learning in a scientifically meaningful way. It prevents it from learning patterns that violate fundamental principles. This tends to make the models more accurate, require less data to train, generalize better to new situations, and often makes them easier to interpret.
Makes sense. What else makes them specialized?
Another key aspect is designing customized network architectures that are specifically suited for the type of scientific data being analyzed. For example, molecules and interaction networks are naturally represented as graphs. So graph neural networks, GNNs, have become incredibly powerful in chemistry, biology, and materials science because their structure mirrors the structure of the data.
Matching the AI structure to the data structure.
Precisely. Similarly, specialized types of convolutional neural networks, CNNs, have been developed for analyzing specific kinds of scientific image data, like from microscopy or medical imaging, or grid-like data from simulations. It's about using the right tool for the job.
Okay. And is there anything else critical about these scientific AI models?
Yes, one more really important point the sources raise is the increasing focus on explainable AI, or XAI, in the scientific context.
Explainable AI, making the black box less black.
Exactly. For scientific discovery, it's often not enough for an AI model just to make an accurate prediction. Scientists need to understand why the model made that prediction. What features in the data was it looking at? What patterns did it learn? This is absolutely critical for several reasons.
Why is explainability so important in science?
Well, first, for validation and building trust. Scientists need to be able to verify that the AI's reasoning makes sense scientifically. Second, and maybe even more importantly, understanding the AI's reasoning can itself lead to new scientific insights. If the AI finds a novel pattern that leads to a correct prediction, understanding that pattern might reveal something new about the underlying biology, chemistry, or physics. The AI shouldn't just give us answers. Ideally, it should help us ask better questions and deepen our fundamental understanding.
So it's not just about getting the result faster. It's about potentially learning from how the AI got the result. That's a key difference.
A very key difference for scientific progress, yes.
Okay. Now, we focus quite a bit on a few really big areas, drugs, proteins, materials, because the impact there is so clear. But the sources suggest that AI's influence isn't limited to these. It's spreading pretty much everywhere in science, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The applications are becoming incredibly widespread. What we've discussed are maybe some of the most mature or high-profile examples right now, but AI tools and techniques are showing up across virtually every scientific discipline you can think of.
Could you maybe give us just a few quick examples just to illustrate that breadth?
Sure. Climate science is a big one, using AI for better climate modeling, predicting extreme weather events, analyzing satellite data. Astrophysics processing vast amounts of data from telescopes, identifying exoplanets, classifying galaxies, studying cosmic phenomena. Particle physics, sifting through the petabytes of data generated by colliders like the LHC to find evidence of new particles or forces. Neuroscience, modeling brain activity, analyzing brain imaging data, trying to understand neural circuits. Ecology and conservation, monitoring biodiversity, using automated sensors and image recognition, tracking animal populations, predicting ecosystem responses to change. The list just goes on and on.
It really does sound like it's becoming difficult to find an area of science that won't be significantly impacted by AI in the near future. The potential we've discussed is just incredible, really exciting, but and there's always a but. The sources are also very clear that we need to be realistic. There are significant challenges, hurdles, and important ethical considerations that we absolutely have to address as AI becomes more integrated into science.
Yes, it's absolutely vital to look at the necessary caution alongside celebrating the potential. This isn't a magic wand, and deploying it effectively and responsibly requires tackling several key issues that the sources consistently raise.
What are some of the biggest hurdles we need to be aware of?
Well, first and foremost, circling back to the data. Challenges around data quality, accessibility, and potential bias remain huge. As we said, AI models inherit the flaws in their training data. If scientific data sets are incomplete or noisy or contain historical biases in how they were collected or curated.
Then the AI's predictions or discoveries will reflect those biases or errors.
Exactly. They can lead to erroneous conclusions, skewed results, or even reinforce existing inequalities in research, for instance, if data predominantly comes from certain populations. That's why those fair data principles, making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, aren't just technical guidelines. They're fundamental for ensuring the reliability and fairness of AI-driven science.
Okay, so data integrity is paramount. What else? You mentioned the black box problem earlier.
Right, the interpretability challenge. While progress is being made on explainable AI, XAI, many of the most powerful deep learning models are still inherently complex and opaque. It can be very difficult to understand precisely why they make a specific prediction or reach a certain conclusion.
And why is that lack of transparency such a problem in science?
It hinders scientific validation, as we discussed. If you can't understand the reasoning, it's hard to fully trust the result or be sure it's not based on some spurious correlation in the data. It also limits our ability to gain those deeper, fundamental scientific insights from the AI's process. We get an answer, but not necessarily understanding.
And if you can't understand how it works, or if the data and model aren't shared, it must be hard for other scientists to reproduce the findings, right? Which is core to science.
Exactly. Reproducibility is a cornerstone of the scientific method. For AI-driven discoveries to be accepted, there needs to be sufficient transparency regarding the AI models used, the code, the data sets, the training procedures, so that other researchers can potentially verify, replicate, or build upon the findings. And related to that is robustness, ensuring the AI models aren't overly sensitive to small, irrelevant variations in the input data, that they generalize reliably.
Makes sense. What about the human side of this? The scientists actually using these powerful AI tools, are there risks there?
Yes, the sources point to the risk of over-reliance and what's called automation bias. There's a potential danger that scientists could become overly dependent on AI tools, perhaps trusting their outputs too readily without sufficient critical scrutiny.
So, potentially diminishing critical thinking or maybe missing subtle errors that the AI makes.
That's the concern. The goal should be for AI to augment human intelligence, creativity, and critical thinking, not replace the essential human element of skepticism, intuition, and careful validation. We need to be mindful of keeping the human firmly in the loop.
That's a really important point. What about fairness in who gets to use these tools? Are they accessible to everyone?
That's another major challenge: access and equity. Developing and running cutting-edge AI models often requires significant computational resources, powerful GPUs, large clusters, and access to those massive curated data sets we talked about.
Which aren't available everywhere.
Exactly. There's a real risk that these powerful AI tools could exacerbate existing inequalities in science, creating a wider divide between well-funded researchers and institutions, often in the global north, and those with fewer resources elsewhere. Ensuring more equitable global access to AI tools, compute power, and large data sets is going to be vital for ensuring that the benefits of AI in science are shared broadly.
A crucial point for global scientific progress. And finally, thinking even bigger. What about the ethical implications of the discoveries themselves, especially if AI is speeding them up dramatically?
This is a profound consideration raised in the sources. AI has the potential to significantly accelerate the pace of discovery, including in areas with potentially significant societal or ethical ramifications.
Like what kind of discoveries?
Well, think about discovering novel pathogens, perhaps more easily understanding how to make them more virulent or transmissible, or designing new materials with powerful dual-use potential materials that could be incredibly beneficial, but also perhaps used for harmful purposes. Or even insights into biology that could be used for ethically questionable modifications.
So, AI could lower the barrier to potentially dangerous knowledge.
It could accelerate access to such knowledge. This means there's a growing need for proactive, ethical oversight and governance structures to run alongside the scientific research process. We need robust discussions and frameworks for anticipating and managing the potential societal consequences of AI-accelerated discoveries, ensuring that this powerful technology is developed and used responsibly for human benefit. It's not just about the technical hurdles of making the AI work, it's about the broader wisdom required to wield its power.
It really underscores that this isn't purely a technical revolution happening in labs. It's deeply intertwined with societal values and requires very careful navigation.
Absolutely. It demands ongoing dialogue between scientists, ethicists, policymakers, and the public.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the nuts and bolts of how AI works in science to these really big picture implications. To try and wrap things up, what would you say is the core takeaway message about AI and scientific discovery as we see things right now in mid-2025?
I think the fundamental message consistently across the sources is that AI has definitively moved beyond being just a peripheral tool. It's becoming a truly central, synergistic partner in the process of scientific discovery. It's this combination of the pattern-finding, predictive, and generative power of sophisticated, domain-specific AI models with the availability of massive data sets that's driving these landmark breakthroughs we're seeing.
And that synergy you mentioned, the interplay between human ingenuity, intuition, asking the right questions, and the sheer analytical and generative power of AI, that really seems to be the key to unlocking entirely new scientific frontiers.
It is. It's amplifying human capabilities and allowing us to tackle complexity in ways we couldn't before. It's genuinely changing both the rate and the very nature of scientific discovery.
So looking ahead just briefly, what might we expect next? Even deeper integration, maybe more autonomous AI systems in science.
The trajectory certainly points towards deeper and broader integration across all fields. We might see systems that edge closer to being autonomous robot scientists for certain types of routine discovery tasks, but perhaps more likely, and maybe more excitingly in the near term, is AI evolving into an even more sophisticated collaborative partner for human scientists.
A partner that doesn't just analyze data on command, but
maybe helps brainstorm hypotheses more proactively, suggests novel experimental directions, helps interpret complex results in more intuitive ways. Essentially, an AI partner that truly augments human creativity, scientific intuition, and the whole process of asking new and deeper questions about the world.
that's a powerful vision for the future of science. And it brings us, I think, to a really important thought for you, our listener, to maybe sit with after this conversation. Given the truly immense and rapidly growing power of AI to accelerate discovery, to help us tackle critical global challenges like disease and climate change, but also considering the challenges and ethical dimensions we've discussed, how do we, as a society, collectively ensure the continued ethical development and thoughtful application of this transformative technology within science?
It's a crucial question.
It seems clear from these sources that figuring that out isn't just a potential opportunity or a side issue. Given the stakes, it feels like a real necessity for navigating the future responsibly.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating world of AI and scientific discovery. If you found this exploration valuable, please make sure to subscribe to the deep dive for more analyses of complex topics, always grounded in the sources you share with us. We'll see you next time.